Hi everyone, my name is Austin, and guess what? Michael Mann is directing another movie after 8 years. Yes, I know, that's amazing. He hasn't directed a movie in over 8 years? What happened? I'll tell you what happened. It sort of just came and went. Yeah, that happened. So anyway, with the announcement of Michael Mann directing yet another movie, I think it's best decided to direct one of his masterpieces. And why not start with a masterpiece quite like Heat, directed by Michael Mann, starring Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, and Val Kilmer. So without further ado, let's talk about it. The plot for the movie centers on two characters, one on the right side of the law and the other who's not. On the opposite side of the law is Neil McCauley, a professional thief based out of Los Angeles who, along with his gang, decide to pull off one last heist and call it there, due to the strain that has been put upon them. Meanwhile, former Marine and current LAPD Lieutenant Vincent Hanna is assigned to investigate McCauley and his crew's numerous robberies, all while dealing with a strained relationship with his third wife Justine and his stepdaughter Lauren. The film examines the conflict between both men, as Hannah spends much of the movie chasing McCauley, all while documenting the struggles in both their relationships as well as their personal lives. And what follows is one epic chase that you won't want to forget. So yeah, I dig the plot of the film. Has it been done before? Yes, but it works and it's very entertaining throughout. Now let's talk about the production. When it comes to the making of the film, it all traces to the real-life exploits of Neil McCauley, a professional crook and former inmate in Alcatraz who was tracked down by Detective Chuck Adamson in 1964. Prior to this, McCauley spent time in McNeil Island Correction Center, which he was transferred to from Alcatraz in 1961 before being released in 1962. After being released, he began plotting a new set of crimes, for which McCauley's cronies, Michael Perrell and William Pinkerton, at one point robbed a manufacturing company of diamond drill bits using bolt cutters, which was something recreated in the movie when they attempt to snag some precious metals from the depository. Meanwhile, Detective Adamson, for which Al Pacino's Vincent Hanna is based off of, began keeping tabs on McCauley's cohorts. Knowing that not all criminals turn over a new leaf, and usually continue to break the law even after spending some time in the big house. In fact, the real-life McCauley and Adamson actually met once and had coffee together, which provided the inspiration for the film's most notable scene of the hero and villain meeting face-to-face, with much of the dialogue being taken from what the two actually said. Of course, like what happens near the flick's climax, guns were drawn when McCauley and Adamson saw each other again. On March 25th, 1964, McCauley and his regular guys tracked an armored car that was delivering money to a National Tea grocery store, which were fairly common in the Midwest during the 20th century and are no longer a business, on 4720 South Cicero Avenue, Chicago, for which three of the goons entered the store once the drop was performed, where they threatened the clerks and snagged approximately $13,137, which in 2022 was considered to be about $124,000 today, worth of money bags before taking off in a high-speed chase during a rainstorm amid police gunfire. Unbeknownst to McCauley and his gang, Adamson and 8 other detectives blocked off all potential exits, and as soon as the robbers saw the blockade, they realized one thing. It's a trap! All 4 of them soon ditched the vehicle and began shooting, with Russell Breeden, or Bredin, and Michael Perrell being killed in an alleyway, while Miklos Palesti, who Christian Hairless is loosely based off of, shot his way out and escaped, only being caught days after the fact and was sent to prison, and was still alive in 2011. I don't know if he's still alive, but he was definitely when Skyrim came out, so there's that. McCauley, meanwhile, was shot to death on the lawn of a nearby home, which had to be horrifying for the homeowners, at the age of 50 and was a subject of numerous burglaries. Following this, Adamson later went on to have a fairly successful career as a producer in film and television, creating the crime drama Crime Story, and even did writing for Miami Vice, all before his passing on February 22nd, 2008, at the age of 71, for which Michael Mann dedicated his 2009 film Public Enemies to Adamson. Another thing to note, Jon Voight's character of Nate is based on Edward Bunker, a convicted felon turned author, actor, and screenwriter who wrote the scripts for Straight Time, Runaway Train, and Animal Factory, and even appeared in films like the aforementioned films he wrote for, along with films like The Long Riders, The Running Man, Miracle Mile, Tango and Cash, and most notably Reservoir Dogs, in which he played Mr. Blue, who functioned as a consultant to Man on Heat, which is fitting as both Voight and Bunker kind of look similar. And Voight was also in Runaway Train, so it strangely fits. And now hey, what's this thing? The first draft for Heat was written by Michael Mann in 1979, which is around 180 pages, with rewrites being performed constantly following the release of his feature film debut, Thief, a film I will get around to watching in the near future. That Criterion Collection release is perfection, man. Anyway, while doing a promotional interview for his 1983 film The Keep, aka that one film that didn't get a DVD release until 2020, and that was in Australia, and whose original cut still hasn't been seen or released despite numerous petitions calling for its release.
No! Give it to me! No! Let me see it!
He actually mentioned that the script was in fact a thing, and hoped that a potential director would come in and make the project a reality. He offered the project to Warriors director Walter Hill, but he said no to the project, and thus Mann continued to rewrite the draft. Following Mann's successes with Miami Vice and Crime Story, NBC asked him to try his hand at creating the next big crime TV show, so he decided to take the draft that he had written over time, cut out 110 pages, and create essentially a 90-minute pilot for a television series revolving around the robbery homicide division of the LAPD. This pilot starred the late Scott Plank as Vincent Hanna, and Alex MacArthur as the Neil Macaulay-esque Patrick McLaren, and also featured the likes of Michael Rooker, Xander Berkeley, Daniel Baldwin, the late Clarence Gilliard Jr., and Cary Hiroyuki Tagawa.
Your soul is mine.
And featured a cover of The Doors' LA Woman by Billy Idol. About at least a third of the script was shrunk down from its original length, and many of the subplots seen in Heat were dropped for time constraints. While this movie, in the tradition of Mann's other films, including those released into theaters, was shot in 19 days, which is pretty quick if I'm being honest. Most films usually take a few months or a couple of years. Mann's films take 3 weeks. NBC soon saw the pilot and weren't exactly thrilled when they saw Plank portraying Hannah, telling Mann that they would only buy it if Plank was recast, which he refused, and thus the show was cancelled, with the pilot airing as a TV movie known as LA Takedown in August 27th of 1989. The movie received mixed reviews, with the main point of contention being the acting, and has mostly received VHS and DVD releases in Europe. I haven't seen LA Takedown personally, so I can't say much on what I think about it other than it exists and was the basis for what Heat would become. Not much to write home about. Now then, when did the movie finally commence production fully? The film finally commenced its full production on April 5th, 1994, following a scrapped James Dean biopic that Michael Mann had considered making, which eventually evolved into the 2001 made-for-TV movie starring James Franco. Mann produced Heat with Art Linson, a producer on movies like Car Wash, American Hot Wax, Melvin and Howard, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, The Untouchables, Scrooge, Casualties of War, Dick Tracy, Singles, This Boy's Life, The Edge, Fight Club, Heist, Into the Wild, and The Runaways, while Mann had Al Pacino and Robert De Niro in mind as his first choices for the roles of Vincent Hanna and Neil McCauley respectively. Excuse me. And when they saw the script, they immediately said yes. As you could tell, much of the film was marketed as the first on-screen appearance of Pacino and De Niro together, having starred in The Godfather Part 2, and because of that film's double narrative structure, with one focusing on Michael Corleone as the new dawn of the Corleone family, and the other covering Vito Corleone during his younger years, they never shared a scene together. So a lot of hype was built around these two actors being in the same room together. Meanwhile, Mann hired Janice Pauly, who did work on The Last of the Mohicans, as the film's location manager, for which she began scouting locations from August to December of 1994. Mann also recommended searching for places that had yet to be filmed there, and for which Pauly found at least 85 locations, and about 10 of those were previously used, while the other 75 locations were never seen on film prior. One location that almost ended up not being used was the Los Angeles International Airport, in part due to a threat to the airport by the Unabomber. And Mann has even said on the DVD commentary that due to 9/11, the climax couldn't be done the way it was. While for the much longer shootout scene, the production team brought on British ex-Special Air Service Sergeant Andy McNabb as a technical weapons trainer and advisor in order to make it look more realistic, even constructing a training curriculum to train the actors for 3 months using live rounds before utilizing blanks for the actual take, and trained with them for the bank robbery scene in order to make one of the greatest shootouts of all time. And with that, let's move to the next segment. This is just going to be a mishmash of certain things, so bear with me here while I briefly go over these things. For the casting of Heat, like I mentioned, Robert De Niro was the first big choice to play really any role in the movie, and was the first to receive the script, and then showed it to Al Pacino, who was all in on being in the movie. De Niro loved the story, and felt it had an authenticity and a sense of realness to it, while in a 2016 Q&A hosted by director Christopher Nolan, Pacino viewed his character as essentially being under the influence of cocaine, which could explain the more over-the-top moments in the movie. Meanwhile, Keanu Reeves was offered the chance to play Chris Shiherlis in the film, but he declined because he wanted to instead play Hamlet at the Royal Manitoba Theatre Center, so Val Kilmer was given the role instead. To prepare for their roles, Michael Mann took De Niro, Kilmer, and actor Tom Sizemore down to Folsom State Prison to interview actual career criminals, while Ashley Judd met with several housewives who were former prostitutes, and something, now blood. Lastly, the principal photography lasted around 107 days, because not all of the films that were actually filmed in 19 days. It's just exceptionally fast format. During the summer of 1995, with all the shooting being done, as you can tell, on location in Los Angeles, as the director did not want to shoot the film on a soundstage. And with that, let's get to my thoughts on the film.
He's a masterpiece. It really is. And I'm not kidding. It's one of the best crime epics out there, and one of Michael Mann's best films. Same goes for Collateral. For starters, look at the cinematography of the film. Just look at it. It's amazing. It captures Los Angeles beautifully and feels dynamic and fluid when the action gets hot, and is also a showcase for Mann's stylish filmmaking. And it appears Mann knew he had a winning cinematographer here, as Dante Spinotti also shot Manhunter, The Last of the Mohicans, The Insider, and Public Enemies for the director. Another plus, the editing, because it's also great. It's fast and fluid, and makes the shootouts feel action-packed and exhilarating. Not to mention, makes the movie incredibly well paced. This movie runs around 2 hours and 50 minutes long, which is 10 minutes shy of 3 hours, so good pacing is important so you don't get this happening.
I'm so stinking bored!
But enough about the style. What about the substance? Well, the writing is top-notch, and the way the plot turns out is powerful and poignant, particularly toward the end when the two main characters face off. And you know what really helps with the script? The acting. And boy oh boy, is it a powerhouse of great performances. First off, Al Pacino gives one of his best performances as Lieutenant Vincent Hanna, who as the movie goes on, you see how deep his character is. You see Hanna's commitment to catching Neil McCauley, and McCauley's crew as a whole, and his commitment to law enforcement, and just how far he goes to try and catch them, proving that, much like another honest cop Pacino played, Frank Serpico, that he is on the right side of the law. Yet at the same time, Hanna's dedication to enforcing the law also puts a damper on his personal life, causing friction between both his wife and stepdaughter, and as the movie goes on, Hanna's wife Justine leaves him, and his stepdaughter Lauren even attempts suicide at one point. Pacino gives a very powerful performance here, as you see both the ups and downs to Hanna's profession, as well as going over the top for some classic moments that have become ingrained in our minds since.
Give me all you got! Give me all you got!
But that's just one part of this contraption, as Robert De Niro gives an excellent performance with his character of Neil McCauley, an experienced criminal who's definitely very layered throughout the film. McCauley lives under a motto: don't let anything into your life that you can't get out of within 30 seconds if you can feel the heat around the corner. Something that comes into question when he begins pursuing a relationship with a graphic designer named Edie. You also see McCauley's want to get out of the business when it becomes clear that it's becoming too dangerous for him and his crew to keep pulling robberies. De Niro is spectacular here, as despite McCauley's status as a criminal, you do find him fascinating for how much depth he has, which is something definitely apparent in the coffee shop scene, which is one of the greatest scenes in the movie. Within this one scene, you see both the pros and cons of both Hanna and McCauley's professions, and while they do respect each other, they will try to kill each other if the need be should push come to shove. And given how the film ends, well, let's just say push came to shove and Hanna took the shot. But that's just the two main actors. What about the rest of the cast? Well, Val Kilmer's pretty good in the movie, playing the role of Chris Shiherlis perfectly, functioning as McCauley's right-hand man, and is actually the only one of McCauley's crew to make it out alive. He's a cool, slick marksman, and Kilmer gives Shiherlis a lot of charisma and character, something that when you give the actor something to work with, you get it. Hell, I would have paid good money to see him play Albert Wesker in a Resident Evil movie. That would have been awesome. But enough about dream casting ideas. There's also great performances from Ashley Judd as Shiherlis' wife Charlene, whom throughout also feels isolated from her husband, and it's only when Chris tries to make amends with her, only to warn him to escape, that shows that, well, she does technically still care about him somewhat. There's also John Voight as Nate, McCauley's fence, who also sells a lot of his stolen goods. The late Tom Sizemore is the enforcer Michael Chirito. Diane Venora as Hannah's wife Justine, whom throughout feels distant from him due to his chasing after Macaulay. Natalie Portman as Hannah's stepdaughter Lauren, who feels disconnected from her stepfather, and was also Portman's second role in a big motion picture following her debut in Leon the Professional. Amy Brenneman as Edie, Macaulay's girlfriend. William Fichtner as Roger Van Zandt, a money launderer that Macaulay tries to sell his own stolen bonds to, but instead tries to kill him and his crew. And Kevin Gage, playing the role that Xander Berkeley played in LA Takedown, as Waingro, the nutcase newcomer to Macaulay's crew that ends up selling them out to Van Zandt, and also a serial killer who's believed to killed numerous prostitutes. But that's not all, because McKelty Wilson, Bubba from Forrest Gump and Baby-O from Con Air, is in it, as are Wes Studi, Ted Levine, Tom Noonan, Hank Azaria, you know the scene.
Great ass!
Danny Trejo, Henry Rollins, who's playing the character Terry Hiroyuki Tagawa, played in LA Takedown, Tone Loc, Jeremy Piven, Xander Berkeley, here playing Ralph, due to Justine cheats on with Hannah, and even Bud Cort. Needless to say, this is quite a cast. Hot damn, it's fantastic. Then we come to the shootouts for the film. These are a spectacle to behold. While I already mentioned how perfectly these are shot and edited, that's just the tip of the iceberg with these scenes, as the choreography and sound editing for these are amazing, making the shootouts look and feel real. From the robbing of the armored van to the scene where Macaulay's guys nearly get killed by Van Zandt's hitman, and the bank robbery, these are truly some of the best shootouts to ever be put on film, and aren't just a load of hot air. Finally, the music in the movie is pretty stellar, being composed by Elliot Goldenthal, who was a composer for movies such as Drugstore Cowboy, Pet Sematary, Demolition Man, Interview with a Vampire, Michael Collins, A Time to Kill, Sphere, Titus, Frida, and Public Enemies. It helps enhance a lot of the action and increases tension in certain cases, and really works with this type of movie. It also features music from U2 and Brian Eno, collaborating under the group Passengers, Terje Reddahl, Moby, and Lisa Gerrard throughout, and they're pretty good here too. Especially Moby's God moving over the face of the waters, which is used at the end of the film. It's a great soundtrack, and cool music helps enhance the movie quite well, and Heat is no exception for sure. So yeah, Heat is pure greatness, and is a film that is officially worthy of all the praise that it has gotten. Heat was released on December 15th, 1995, where it opened with $8.4 million from 1,325 theaters, placing third at the box office just behind Jumanji and Toy Story, and went on to make $67.4 million in US box offices and $120 million in international box offices, which combined together earned it $187.4 million. Which made it successful, and helped make back a $60 million budget. And it was also a hit with the critics as well, with Roger Ebert giving it 4 out of 4 stars, stating, "It's not just an action picture. Above all, the dialogue is complex enough to allow the characters to say what they're thinking. They are eloquent, insightful, fanciful, poetic when necessary. They're not trapped with cliches. Of the many imprisonments possible in our world, one of the worst must be inarticulate, to be unable to tell another person what you really feel." Todd McCarthy of Variety also wrote this about it, which I find fascinating. Stunningly made and incisively acted by a large and terrific cast, Michael Mann's ambitious study of the relativity of good and evil stands apart from other films of its type by virtue of its extraordinary rich characterizations and its thoughtful, deeply melancholy take on modern life. While it didn't get any award nominations, it has been very influential, with Rolling Stone ranking it at 28 on their greatest movies of the 90s list, and The Guardian placing it as 22 of their list of the greatest crime epics of all time. It also apparently inspired numerous armored car robberies, as well as the 1997 North Hollywood shooting, because it appears any film like this just has to have real-life parallels, because why not? Especially when that last one is considered one of the longest and bloodiest events of its kind in American police history. But really, it's other movies that Heat inspired, with The Dark Knight owing a lot to the film, for which Christopher Nolan used it as inspiration for how Gotham City was portrayed. It also inspired Grand Theft Auto 3, which was highly influential for its open world design, of which the setting was inspired by Heat. The 3-leaf clover mission from Grand Theft Auto 4 pays homage to the film's iconic bank robbery and shootout, and Grand Theft Auto 5, the game that will keep getting re-released even after Grand Theft Auto 6 comes out, has a mission called Blitz Play, which pays homage to the scene where Neil McCauley and his crew rob an armored car. There was going to be a Heat video game, which would have been released for the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, and was being developed by Gearbox Software, but this sadly never happened due to the company not having the license to make the game. There's even been talk about Heat 2 of sorts, which would function as a prequel and sequel to the film, with Adam Driver intended to play the role of a much younger Neil McCauley, which isn't bad casting in all honesty. Regardless, Heat is a classic, both then and now, even without the potential of a prequel or sequel. And who knows, maybe we'll get a Heat video game for the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X and S someday, because this generation could definitely benefit from having that one game that brings back memories of The Godfather the game or Scarface The World Is Yours. I'd be up for it. That or a game where you play as Vincent from Collateral, whichever one works. Heat is one of the best crime epics out there, and I highly recommend it. Whether you decide to pick it up on this 2-disc edition DVD here, or you decide to pick it up on Blu-ray, it's probably going to look even nicer on Blu-ray than it does on DVD. Fuck yeah. I mean, the movie is well shot, so chances are it's going to look even better on Blu-ray. But wherever you decide to pick it up, it's a film that you have got to go see because it is fantastic. Definitely worth watching. The acting is great, the cinematography is brilliant, the editing and action sequences are amazing, the music's pretty good, and it's overall a very touching, engaging, and thoroughly entertaining movie from beginning to end. It's one of those movies that makes you really appreciate Michael Mann for his style and really his way of storytelling. And considering that he is now making another movie, this time about Enzo Ferrari, it's definitely going to be a good time for all the Michael Mann fans out there. And with that, this concludes my review of Heat. I hope you enjoyed it, found it entertaining, educational, and made you want to go seek out this movie. Good. You better seek out this movie. You're failing your test. Trust me, I've already failed you at least a good chunk of the time. So please just do something good for once and maybe let me give you an A so I don't have to see you here again. It'd be nice. The less I have to look at you, the better. The less you have to look at me, the better. At any rate, so with that, I will catch you later. I'll see you next time.
Because she got a great ass. And you got your head all the way up it.